Alright everyone, today's lesson I would like to teach everyone how to do the computation with fractions. So basically adding, subtracting, multiplication and also division. So computation with fraction. Alright, so we're going to start with some addition and subtraction first. Alright, so addition and subtraction with fractions are pretty, well, it depends on the question. Sometimes, it depends on the fractions. If you do have the fraction with the same denominators, then the question becomes really simple. If fraction with different denominators, then you do need to make the same equivalent fractions before you can, plus or minus fractions. All right. So we start with questions with the same denominators. So denominators are equal to each other, and then how do we plus or minus fractions? All right. So that's going to be quite easy to do. So same denominator. All right, so the question would be something like, 2 over 4 plus 7 over 4. All right, so this is really simple, right? 2 over 4 plus 7 over 4. Denominators are equal to each other, so you don't need to change anything. All you need to do is you just plus the numerators together. So the answer for that is just 2 plus 7. And then please remember, this is really important. You never plus the denominator. All right, you leave the denominator, that still equals to 4. You just plus the numerators together. So that becomes 9 over 4. Now, you don't need to change that into a mixed numeral. Leaving it as an improper fraction is good enough. All right. So, yeah, that's the first example. Really simple to do if the denominators are equal to each other. All right, let's do a subtraction one. So, how about 13 over 10 minus 7 over 10? Alright, question like this one, same thing. Alright, as you can see, the denominators are equal to each other, so all you have to do is subtract 7 from 13. So that gives you 13 minus 7 over 10. Now remember, you do not minus the denominators, otherwise the denominator becomes 0, which is not allowed in a fraction. Alright, so that gives you 6 over 10. Alright, now 6 over 10, is this the final answer? You do need to change and simplify your answers, right? When we're talking about mathematics, your answer must be in the simplest form. So therefore, we need to find the highest common factor. And this time, I can divide both the top and the bottom by 2. So the highest common factor is actually equal to 2. So the final answer becomes 3 over 5. All right, so this is really simple if the denominators are equal to each other. All right. Now, what happens if the denominators are different? So different denominators, and how do we do the calculation with different denominators? All right, so let's start with the first example here. How about 1 over 2 plus 2 over 3? How do we do this question here if the denominators are different numbers? All right, so what we need to do is there's a process called making the equivalent fraction. We need to find the lowest common multiple if the denominators are different. So we need to use the lowest common multiples, which is also abbreviated as LCM, of the denominators to find equivalent fraction. All right, so this is really important. All right, so you need to find the lowest common multiples. All right, now lowest common multiples between 2 and 3. Firstly, what is the multiple? We times the number by 1, 2, 3, and goes on, right? So that will be 2, 4, 6, 8, and it goes on. For 3, there will be 3, and 6, and 9, and it goes on, all right? And then if we look at the common multiples and the lowest common multiples right now, as you can see, the lowest common multiples is equal to 6, all right? So that tells you that we need to, the lowest common multiple is equal to 6. That means we need to change the denominator into common 6. All right, so how do we do it? All right, we need to change both denominator into 6. All right, how do I do this? Well, that means we need to times this number by 3 here to change into to 6, which means you also need to times the numerator by 3. And the same with the denominator here. So times by 2. So now you can combine the two fractions because the denominators are equal to each other. So that becomes 7/6. All right. So you might have a question about, making, the lowest common multiple. That's pretty easy. All I have to do is simply times these two numbers together. Is that true? Can I just simply times these two numbers together to find the lowest common multiples? Well, the answer to that is no. If you just simply times the two numbers on the denominators, you're only finding the common multiples, but that's not the lowest common multiples. Well, you can do that. That just means later, for some questions, you might need to simplify this one further. So I'd like to give you an example to show you what happens, all right? How about let's try this one here. 7/12 plus 1/3. Okay, now let's do this question using two different ways, all right? The method where I find the common multiples by just multiplying the denominators, all right, because usually this is what students do. They don't want to find the lowest common multiple. They just want to find a common multiple. So they multiply these two numbers. So that gives you 36 as a common multiples, right? And then that means if you times here by 3, here by 12. So times here by 12, times here by 12. All right, so that gives you 21 and 12. All right, now when you plus them together, you're going to get 33/36. But that's not the final answer. As you can see here, you're going to divide both the top and the bottom by common factors this time. That gives you 11/12. Okay, that's the one way you can do this question. All right, so you simply times 12 and 3 together, and then you combine the two fractions. And then after that, you have to make sure that you remember to simplify. How about if we do this question using the lowest common multiples, right? Instead of times these two numbers together, we're actually using the common multiples, the lowest common multiples. All right, now between 12 and 3, the lowest common multiples is actually 12. Because all you have to do is simply times here by 4 and 4, you can get to 12. You don't have to change the first fraction. So that gives you 7/12 plus 4/12, which is equal to 11/12. And then you don't need to simplify. So if you compare these two steps here, all right, I'm pretty sure that the second method is slightly faster than the first one. Especially if the denominator is a large number, then I will highly recommend you using the lowest common multiple to do the question instead of just multiplying the denominators. Okay, so this is very important. All right, I'd like to do another one at this time involving mixed numerals. How do we plus or add mixed numerals? Okay. All right, so let's try C. How about this one here? We have 4 and 2 and over 5 minus 2, 5/6. There's a couple of ways you can do this question. All right, I prefer that you actually change that mixed numerals into improper fractions. All right, so this is what you do. You multiply this 4 and 5 together. And then once you get the numbers, you plus. So that's still 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 plus 2, 22. Next one is 6. 6 times by 2 is 12. 12 plus 5 is 17. Okay. Now you get 5 and 6. We need to start to think about what is the lowest common multiple between 5 and 6. Actually, this time 5 and 6, the lowest common multiple is 30. Oops. All right, so now we need to change both fraction into denominator equal to 30. That means we need to times here by 6, times there by 5. So it is going to be a larger number here. All right, so 22 times by 6 is 132. And then 17 times by 5 is 85. All right, so once you finish that, you can actually subtract the numerators together. So 132 minus 85 is 47. And that's it. That's your fraction. Again, depends on the question. You don't really need to change that back into mixed numerals. If the question asks you to just find the answers, then you don't have to change it. Unless the question asks you to leave the answer in mixed numerals, then that's the time that you change it. Okay. So this is addition and subtraction. Now remember, the most important thing is the same denominators. You can't do anything without the same denominators. Okay. All right, I'd like to show you how to do multiplication and division. All right, so how do we do multiplication and division between fractions? I think the multiplication and divisions are slightly easier than addition because you don't need to find the lowest common denominators. So multiplying and dividing, or multiplication and division. Okay, so dividing, dividing fractions. Okay, how do I do that? Multiplying and dividing fractions. All right. For addition, subtraction, pretty easy. Same denominators. Now, multiplication and dividing fractions, we don't need to make the fraction with the same denominator. All right, so the way we do it is we cancel, all right, where possible. We cancel the term the numbers where possible. Then we multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together. That's for multiplication. For division, instead of doing division, we always do the multiplication, but we just multiply by its reciprocal. I'd like to show you what's happening here, all right? So let's start with first an example here. If we have something like 2 over 3 times by 5 over 9. Now, for a question like this, you don't need to, all right? You don't need to make the same denominator at all. All you have to do is multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together, like what we did with equivalent fractions. All right, so that 2 times 5 is 10, and then 3 times by 9 is 27, and that's all. Usually after you finish, you just need to have a look and see if you can simplify the fractions or not. If you can't, that becomes the final answer. All right, so that's pretty easy. All right, now what happens if we do have larger numbers? All right, and what do we do if we have a larger fractions? Like for example, 24 over 8 times by 5 over 3. What do we do in this case? You can still times, times, but I don't recommend you do this way. All right, I recommend you actually cancel the terms. Yes, you cancel. You cancel the numbers first, all right, because it's just easier for you to do the calculation, all right? What does that mean? You can cancel the numbers diagonally, all right? Also, you can simplify the answers vertically. So how about this 2? 24 and 3, I can simplify these, all right, because 24 I can divide it by 3, and 3 you can divide it by 3 as well. That's the highest common factor. So if we divide by 3 here, that becomes 8. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 3 divided by 3 is just 1. Now, once you finish that, you can see that you've got 8 and 8. These two can be cancelled as well. So 8 divided by 8 is just 1. So what do you have left? You just have 1 left on one side. And on the other side, you've got 5 over 1 left. So that's just 5. That's it. That's the answer. All right, it's much easier than you times 24 by 5 and then 8 by 3. And then you simplify. Much, much easier. All right, have a look at another one. 12 over 10 times by 5 over 16. All right, so let's try this. Let's cancel the terms before we multiply. 12 and 10, I can cancel these two by dividing both sides by both top and bottom by 2. So now that gives you 6 and 5. And then I can cancel the 5 and 5 here because that's diagonally. I can cancel these two. And then I can, keep simplifying. So that's 16, all right, and 6. I can simplify that into 3 and 8. So now the final answer is 3 over 8. That's the final answer. That's the simplest answer. All right. So as you can see, it's much easier than you have to do something like this. Because otherwise, if you don't simplify first, right, before multiplication, you are going to get 60 over 160. And then you start to simplify by dividing the highest common factor. And like, for example, you cross out the zeros, divided by 10 and 10. And then you have to divide it by 2 and 2 to finally get to the point where we've got the same answer in the first place. Okay? All right, so that's the way to do it for multiplication. Try to look for something that you can cancel before you multiply. All right, how do we do division? We usually don't do division, we do multiplication. So when you see division, what do? We just multiply the reciprocal, all right? So what does that mean? That means I can say, for example, if we have 2 over 5 divided by 3 over 7, Now that division is going to change that to multiplication. Alright, so that will be 2 over 5. Now we'll change the division to multiplication. And then what we do is we are going to switch both numerators and denominators, alright, for the second fraction. So that gives us 7 over 3. Alright, now once you change that into 7 over 3, it's multiplication, so it becomes multiplying fractions. So the same method apply. We times the numerator 14, we times the denominator 15. And that's all. You simplify the fraction. Alright, so the next one. How about 5 over 8 divided by 15 over 16? Alright, so same thing. We are going to change that into multiplication. We're going to switch between the numerators and denominators. So 5 over 8 times by 16 over 15. Now this time, remember what I told you before. Instead of multiplying the two numerators and denominators, can we simplify first? Well, the answer is yes, you can. So we simplify 8 and 16. We divide everything by 8. That gives us 1 and 2. We can do the same thing for 15 and 5. We can divide everything by 5. That becomes 3 and 1. So now the final answer will be 2 over 3. That's it. Alright, so that's how you do it. Alright, what about if we have mixed numerals? If we do have mixed numerals, that's fine. Alright, we just change the mixed numerals to improper fractions. Like 2 1/3 divided by 1 3/4. So that gives you 3 and 7 on top. Change that into improper fraction first, and that's 7 again. Alright, so once you finish that, we are going to switch the sign and then switch the order. So this division becomes multiplication. 7 over 4 becomes 4 over 7. Okay? Alright, now we can simplify. 7 and 7 cross out, becomes 1 and 1. Then we can just times 4 and 1 together, and 3 and 1 together to form the final answer, which is 4 over 3. Alright, so this is division and multiplication for fractions. So I guess division and multiplication is just slightly easier than addition and subtraction, just because you don't need to make the same denominator. Alright, but you do need to remember some shortcuts by simplifying, cancelling the terms before you times or divide fractions. Okay, that's all I want to teach you this lesson. Alright, next lesson I'd like to teach you how to change from fraction to decimals and decimal to fractions. Alright, so the decimal place values and the fraction decimal conversions. Alright, thank you everyone.